Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Over the Cap podcast. It is July 15th, 2023, and this is Jason Fitzgerald. You can find me on Twitter at Jason_OTC, or I guess you can find me on Threads if I ever use that. Maybe I'll talk about that in a minute, at Over the Cap. And of course, you can email me, Jason at overthecap.com. Hopefully, I can actually get back to you. I know I haven't gotten back to a lot of people, and that's par for the course for me these days, but so it goes. No Nelly this week. Decided to record upstairs instead of downstairs today. Megan has a dance competition she's been at for the last couple of days. So I've been home, and they didn't get back yet. The competition is actually still going on right now, but I think she's done with her dances. So I think I just got word that they will be headed back shortly. It's down in South Jersey, so it's a bit of a drive. So if they're going to come back tonight, they're looking at a couple hour drive. So I would anticipate that they'll be back. I know Megan had a couple of dances that made the finals for her team, but I don't think they won any of those finals rounds. But I'm sure she had a good time anyway. Beer of the night. Yeah, this is a sad one. We Michelob Ultra. Oh, I know. It's a sad thing. Don't fall out of your chair when you hear that. We'll be back with our Dogfish Heads and Southern Tears and whatever else in a week or two. Just decided to go for a light week this week. So we've got the Michelob Ultra. Maybe we'll do one more week with the Michelob Ultra, and then we'll go back to our normal beer of the night. Hopefully the microphone's working okay for this. My son also took over the microphone the other day to turn into a Fortnite microphone. I guess his gaming headset or whatever must have broke. So I guess he's going to use this so he can talk to his buddies while playing Fortnite until he can earn a new headset, whenever that will be. So hopefully he doesn't destroy this microphone in the process. So we'll see. But it seemed like it was recording okay. So yeah, there was the whole Threads thing the other week. Went off with a bang with a lot of people, and I grabbed an account over there. I guess it's tied to your Instagram account. I know I mentioned before I don't use Instagram, but I had an Instagram account because my daughter created an Instagram account. When I found that out, I said, "Uh-oh, I better take over the Instagram account," and ended up doing that. But I never really followed anybody on there. I think the only people I was following on Instagram, I believe, was Disney, which was from my daughter, Troy, Texans cap, and that just was the other day. And I don't think I was following anybody else. So I didn't really bring anything over with me to Threads. But my first impression of Threads was this was just something that was very quickly thrown together by the people at Meta, just trying to capitalize on all of the negativity that has surrounded Twitter since Elon Musk took it over. And they did this weird thing where they rate limited people the other week. Maybe it's still going on. I don't know. I haven't been on Twitter as much either. But like that, there was just a weird thing. And so they just rolled this out. It has it's only supported on mobile. The timelines are a mess on it. Finding people is kind of a mess on it. So, I would imagine if you want to get into, verification and stuff, it looks like that also costs money. So no different than Twitter. In that respect, though, I'm assuming that there are checks from Instagram that carry over that you probably had before they started charging for it. But the main thing with it, and I can't imagine that engagement with it is going to last for very long, is, they actually have to invest in it to try to make it something that would be similar to Twitter, because right now it's not. It just reads, to me at least, and again, maybe this is because I didn't have much coming over from Instagram, but my timeline on there basically just reads like a junk feed. It's like the you get to, I made this comment, you get to the bottom of an article, right? And there's like the, what are they, the Outbrain ads, or the, I forget what they're called. The different advertisements that they have that link you to these crazy stories and stuff like that. That's what it feels like. It's like I go on there, and a couple people I follow maybe they're randomly in a thread. I don't even know what you call it. Whatever the timeline is there, the thread line. A couple random things, but it's more stuff along the lines of like, hey, look, Reese Witherspoon is showing me a puppy, or, this social media influencer is going to give me $5,000 if I'm one of the first 10 people to retweet this, or, here's somebody showing me a book that they recently bought. Here's someone talking about how fun it is to be on Threads. It's just random junk that's kind of filled that stuff. So it doesn't have that kind of sense of community. It just feels like a very rushed project to try to take advantage of whatever's been going on with Twitter. And I will say this, and now I've been posting less on Twitter, just a lot has to do with time, which you can see from the lack of stuff on OTC outside of the contract updates. A lot of it has to do with that. And it's also the off season where you don't get as much stuff. But in general, it seems like engagement is way down on Twitter as well. A lot of accounts that I follow and I'm used to seeing a lot of posts from, even in the off season, I feel as if, they're just not there anymore. So I think there's been a lot of radio silence that's kind of been there, which is too bad, but we'll see what happens when the NFL season actually begins and all that picks up, and we'll see if people kind of go back to that platform or they pull away from that platform, or if people use Threads. But with the way Threads is right now, there's no way you could have like a conversation during a Jets game about the Jets. It would just be all over the place, whatever you would see on there, and the way it would show up actually in a timeline. They would need to get that fixed. So we'll see if they actually invest any real stuff in it, if they put an effort into it to make it bigger besides just looking to see how many people would sign up. But for the time being, I'll have something there. It's a pain to post on. It's a pain to post links on. So it's a little bit more of a cumbersome process, at least I found, to do that there than on Twitter. But I'll try to kind of keep up with just putting some stuff on there. But I don't anticipate actually at the moment using it too much besides that. But feel free to give a follow over there. And if stuff comes through, I'll try to answer things on there. But if I ever did like the way I used to do the Twitter sessions at night, you stay up real late and you have a couple drinks and answer people's questions, from 10 o'clock to 1 in the morning. I couldn't do that on that platform right now. Even if I had 20,000 followers on there, I couldn't do it on that platform. There's no way to functionally do that on the phone. To have that type of interaction with that kind of speed, there's just no way to do it. And you can't open up tabs to easily look through stuff. It'd have to be on the computer anyway while trying to do that on the phone. And then there's the whole timeline issue where stuff isn't going to come through properly. So that'd be pretty tough to do on there. So that kind of stuff, if I do another one of those, that'll stick on Twitter. But the next time I think we'll do one of those live Q&A things. I'll try to use YouTube Live or something like that, and just answer it that way. That'll actually probably save some time versus doing typing, but who knows when that'll be, where I'll actually have the time to, do one of those live. So I guess where to start this week, and it's a topic I touched on probably about a month ago when Dalvin Cook got released. And it really gets back to the valuation of the running back position and the stuff that is just really unfortunate for that position. Report came out this week about the Giants and Saquon Barkley being far apart on a deal, and Barkley basically saying, "Hey, I'm going to hold out because this is ridiculous. I'm not going to play in the regular season because I need to get a deal." And it's like the NFL has stripped the players of the leverage to be able to do that, right? They have this artificial deadline of usually, I think it's July 15th. This year it'll be July 17th because the 15th falls on a weekend, where if you don't sign a player to a long-term contract, they're basically stuck. They can't sign a long-term deal at that point. Now, I do believe you could release the player and then sign him, and you could kind of work around it that way. I don't think there would be any reason why you couldn't do that. If you were not not cut him, rescind the tag. You could maybe do that to get around the rules that are there, maybe. But it's kind of open-ended about that, and I could see management council jumping in and not allowing a contract like that to actually be accepted. Pro Football Talk had a report out that he wants $16 million a year. The Giants offered $13 million a year with $26 million in the first 2 years. So it's not a giant gap. I wouldn't say that the Giants' offer at $13 million is unfair. I think that's pretty much right in line with where the market is for running backs right now. It's at the high end of it. Looking for $16 million is not really unfair either. You've seen some other players get that. You're a very popular player within the Giants organization. You're kind of a face of the franchise kind of player. So, you're looking for that top end money. Now, there's a big difference in the breakdown of those $16 million a year deals with the way they were front loaded in cash versus the other side of the coin, which is probably what this $13 million deal was, where it was going to be 26 over the first two. That just sounds like a straight deal that's going to be 13, 13, 13, 13, or, maybe the first 2 years, maybe to be 15 this year. And then you drop that down to 11 the next year to get to the 26. Maybe that's the way that they were thinking of doing it. And that would be kind of in line with, Derrick Henry's deal or a couple of the other players, who signed those deals, Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb. It would be along the lines of that. Do I think 26 over 2 is the fair number? No, but it's a starting point number. You should be above that. I think the market was like 27.5 over 2. Maybe Mixon was at that. I forget. One of the players was right around 27.5. So, he should be at that 27.5, 28 million over 2. And then you kind of walk backwards from there. If we're just talking about making a fair offer, I think within the framework of the marketplace, it's just a very, very, very difficult job to do, to get that kind of contract. The rules are so stacked against the players, and the positions that have the shorter shelf lives, which running back is really the worst one in that regard. It's just very hard for you to really ever stand out. You do get these ebbs and flows at the position where you'll see a couple of players make big money, and then you'll see people that'll follow suit, right? Like the Rams. The Rams were really the first team in years to kind of break this. I'm not going to call it. Let's call it the unwritten rule that you don't pay running backs. They were the first to really break that because the market at that position had completely cratered. It had basically fallen apart, with the exception of 2 contracts. It was Adrian Peterson and Chris Johnson. And for the most part, that was really about it. And they went and they did some outlandish deal for Todd Gurley, which really made very little sense outside of just, you just wanted to keep everybody happy and you didn't want to have anything, fall apart. Within your own locker room, within your own team. So they went ahead and did that, which led to David Johnson doing his deal, led to Le'Veon Bell holding out 1 year and then getting a deal from the Jets in free agency, which was nowhere near as good as the contracts that, Gurley signed, probably not even what Johnson had signed. But, the market began to move at that point because now it was like, okay, well, the Rams did it, so somebody else can do it, because it's not like Gurley was this otherworldly player. He had a good season. And, it wasn't like he was Barry Sanders or something like that, where you just say, okay, he's just a complete outlier player. So it was a reasonable comparison. So you had Ezekiel Elliott, then you had Christian McCaffrey, then you had a couple of other players, as the market kind of dropped down a little bit, but still getting, $12, $13 million a year. And, it's the same kind of thing that happens. If you're lucky enough to fall into that first wave that signs, you get your money. But the problem is, if you come right after those players, you're probably not going to get it because you see the fallout from those player contracts. And essentially, it's just simply history repeating itself in the NFL. Because if you go back to the real devaluation of the position, just in terms of contracts, all right, you basically have two ways that the position has been devalued. One of them is contract based, and the other one is more NFL based. And that they're two different things to talk about. But from the contract side, what you had were basically when the NFL was still a one-back league, late 90s, early 2000s, teams would invest a lot of money in that one player. The Sean Alexanders, Clinton Portis, LaDainian Tomlinson, Curtis Martin. You can go up and down the list of all these players who signed these big deals back then. I mean, just to give you an idea, this is how these contracts, when inflated for the salary cap, would look today. Barry Sanders in 1997 would be the equivalent of a player earning $35.4 million a year. Terrell Davis in 1998, $33.4. Emmitt Smith in 1996 would be the equivalent of someone at $31.9. Marshall Faulk, 1999, $31.8 million. Adrian Peterson in 2011 would be the equivalent of $26.5. Curtis Martin with the Jets in 1998, the equivalent of $25.7 million a year. Chris Johnson, $25.2. Clinton Portis, 2004, $22.9 million. Tomlinson in 2004 would be $22.3. Peterson's restructure, it's renegotiation. I don't even know what you want to call that one. That's 22. That was a very minor modification. Edgar James would be $21 million. Marshall Faulk again, $20.9. Jerome Bettis, $19.5. Reggie Bush, this was his rookie deal, would be the equivalent of a player right now making $19.3. Marshawn Lynch in 2015, $18.8. Marshall Faulk, 94, $18.6. Le'Veon Bell, that was the franchise tag he sat out on, would be $18.4. Then you get to Todd Gurley in 2018, which would be an $18.2 in today's money. And then you get to Christian McCaffrey, which is just under that at $18.2 as well. Zeke, Kamara. But Kamara's deal is just a phony baloney deal. Sean Alexander would be at 17. LaShawn McCoy about 17. But you can see, these names. And obviously, we don't have all these player contracts from back then. We weren't around. It's kind of fun to look at. But the time that it takes to track all those deals down, it's not really worthwhile to rebuild those databases. There's no real functionality in it. There's no real value in it because the league has changed so much. Those deals, other than just the points that I'm making there, are kind of pointless to look at. But basically what happened, or most of these players would sign these big deals, and very quickly their body would fall apart. After they signed those big contracts, they kind of became an albatross on the salary cap. Now a couple of the players did not, in large part just because you got so many opportunities, the volume was there, that unless you just had no burst at all, where you were going to average like 3-4 a carry, you were fine. If you were averaging 4-1, 4-2, the games are all kind of low scoring back then anyway. And you're getting this big workload to keep your overall numbers up. So it didn't look that bad. But eventually you would get to the point where you just got hurt, and then you get hurt again, and then you get hurt again after that. And you weren't able to be productive at that level because you're only playing in 10 games a year. You're someone like an Arian Foster. Arian Foster was great when he played, but it was a question of how often is he going to play. He was basically the equivalent of what you see with Christian McCaffrey right now, right? Every time Christian McCaffrey plays, puts up a bunch of yards, explosive, and then he'll miss 3/4 of a season with injury. So you go to those contracts and you see what happened. Teams started to look at it, and it was very easy to see, well, what is one of the worst things that's happening to our salary cap right now? It's these running backs that we have to keep on the roster just for salary cap considerations. And it wasn't like you had a lot of examples to point to as, okay, our guy, it didn't work out with, but for this guy, it did. That those are examples that you can point to, like with wide receivers, tight ends, maybe, different positions. Running back, it was few and far between. It wasn't like, well, for every one of these players, there's this player. It was more like for every 12 bad deals, maybe one would be okay. That was kind of how it was kind of working out. So teams pulled back on it. They pulled back using draft picks on the players, and they pulled back in the money that was going to be committed in the extensions. And it was still decent money. And because the players maybe weren't being drafted as high, the expectations weren't as much for what those contracts would be. So, the market kind of settled into place, for many years until the Gurley thing happened. And all these guys benefited because of Gurley. They all did. He is like the most important, he's the most pivotal player at running back, in the last 6-7 years, just because of that contract that he did, which got a number of players money and really did even raise the bar for all these other players that are at 12 million or so a year. But what happened is that, Todd Gurley fell apart very quickly. Ezekiel Elliott fell apart very quickly. Christian McCaffrey is always hurt. He was fine last year in those couple of games in San Francisco. Who knows what'll happen with him this year? You look at Dalvin Cook was released. Joe Mixon just took a big pay cut, which for some reason is being reported as a restructure. I have no idea why that is. But he just took a pay cut. You have Derrick Henry is probably going to be on the trade block a couple weeks into the season. And Derrick Henry's been he's been one of those guys who's been a decent value, I think, on the extension. Aaron Jones in Green Bay had to take a pay cut. Alvin Kamara is probably only on the Saints because of salary cap considerations. There's just a ton of examples of why did we do this? And when you look at the numbers, this was something that I did a couple of years ago where I started looking at contracts for players that were, extended players. How did they compare, to their pre-extension seasons? And everybody more or less fell off a cliff, with the exception of a player like a David Johnson, only because he was hurt beforehand. So his numbers were so low because he was hurt the year before he signed. He had nowhere to go but up, even though he was ineffective. He was more productive than he was in the year before, just simply because the year before he was injured. So that's the issue that faces Saquon Barkley right now. Jacobs gets thrown into that category, and Pollard is sort of thrown into that category. They're both a different level, I think, than Barkley. I think Barkley is more of a trigger point because Barkley is explosive player in a giant media market, on a team that made the playoffs last year, in surprising fashion. And I think there's a lot of people who look at this like he deserves something for this, the way that Daniel Jones just got his big contract extension. Why are you not giving Barkley, that type of contract extension? Not to that level, but, just that. Why are you not getting a deal done? Why were you able to do that with Jones, but you can't do that with Barkley? And I mean, the answer is, he's a quarterback. I mean, it's just very simple. If you release Saquon Barkley right now, I don't know what he would get. I'm not sure he'd get $13 million a year on the open market, especially in the summer. It'd be more interesting, if something like that happened in March. But right now, it'd be hard for me to believe that he would really get that. I just don't think he would. Now, in terms of the way the game changed, that's something completely different. Growing up, the NFL was a lot about running the football, playing defense, running the football, playing defense. But a lot of what happened, in the time since then, really, it's when you get, I think, into the Brady and Manning era. And, you've got a lot of these other quarterbacks who were very good in that time frame too. you started to see teams, number one, they started to kind of get away from this idea that a quarterback can only be drafted if he fits a specific mold, right? Like he's got to be 6'4". He's either got to have a cannon for an arm, or he's got to be super accurate and have like this high football IQ to go out there and dissect these complicated defenses in the NFL. And I think teams started to say, well, you know what? What if we actually began to kind of tailor the system a little bit to the quarterback's strengths and weaknesses rather than just kind of forcing him to play a way that maybe he's not comfortable, right? You go back to someone like McNabb. McNabb, they brought along, slowly in Philadelphia. They let him do his thing. When he was there, he improved a lot as a passer over time. But he was always effective there because it's not like they told him you can never run. You can never do this. Michael Vick was able to run a lot. You look at someone like Drew Brees. Drew Brees is short, relatively short, for a quarterback's position. But, you come up with ways that you can utilize him despite that. And, he turned into a Hall of Fame level quarterback. And then you started to see the development, right? You had Tony Romo, he was undrafted, I think, right? You had guys like a Matt Castle. You had a Matt Schaub. You started to see all these people pop up. I'm not saying be great, but they were effective. They were efficient. They'd sometimes get their teams into the playoffs. And those teams were having more success with those players than if you just took a junk quarterback and threw him on a team with a quote-unquote dominant running back. Those teams weren't going to be as successful overall simply because the passing game was becoming more efficient. You're doing things that play to their strengths rather than maybe playing just to their weaknesses. And, then you start to have rule changes that make it easier for wide receivers. And then the other thing, and I think we often overlook this, the NFL was a very, in that running back dominant era, it was very closed with a lot of the ways that teams would run their offense. Now, not everybody, but, when the Rams were the greatest show on turf, it was like, wow, they've got these two guys plus the running back that are, two guys catching a bunch of passes and they've got the running back. It's like, what an amazing, group that is. Minnesota, who had those dominant offenses with Chris Carter and Randy Moss. It was the same thing. It's like, wow, it's just it's a different thing. Because really before that, a lot of the stuff that you saw from the teams was very one wide receiver dominant. So it was like you had one wide receiver. So defensively, you could basically, if you could get your dominant corner and your corner at the time would play against the dominant receiver, you could, in theory, shut down a lot of the passing attack because there weren't a lot of plays designed to go to wide receiver number 2. Your tight end was a pure safety valve, right? Your tight end position was basically, okay, when necessary, when you're not blocking, I want a guy that can lumber 7 yards down the field, have his back turned completely to the end zone, catch the ball with both hands, and probably just fall down, or maybe rumble for a couple more yards. That was the way that you ran it. Now, I'm always partial to Corbett, but obviously there's a lot of other players that played the slot, and it started to create like a whole new thing. It's like, wait a minute, we can get these kind of shorter, faster guys there running across the middle, and they can catch the ball on the run, and we can utilize them in an offense. So it was like, okay, now you've got 3 guys, and now rules changes are coming. So now it's like, okay, we've got 3 wide receivers on the field. We've got our top guy. Can we trust more on the second guy too? Yeah. And what about this third guy? We can actually have a third route being run. Yeah. And then, things change even further where it's not just the random every now and then you're getting this, athletic tight end, who's a really good receiver. Now you're actually going into college and you're finding players who are basically just big bodies that can play wide receiver, but you're putting them at tight end. And you're creating all these mismatches. And all of it's taking away from the running back because now you've got all these different viable options in the passing game. And you can't, as a defense, just go out there and get one player. You can't go and get your Darrelle Revis and say, shut down the top guy. Because on 90% of the teams, if you shut down the top guy, it doesn't mean you're shutting down their passing offense. Their passing offense is probably going to function as normal if the rest of your defense kind of sucks. All you're doing is taking away one target out of 3, 4, 5. Whereas, in the 80s or 90s, if you took away one guy, you might shut down an offense. You might shut down a passing game because they didn't really have another player there that they trusted or a system that was really designed to go to those players. So you bring all that in, and it's like if you are now completing 68% of your passes, and those numbers are way higher on first down, they're way higher on second down, it's like, why would you run the football as much? Especially knowing the guys get hurt. So that's out of the control for the running backs, right? That part of it is out of control, out of their control. They don't really have a leg to stand on with that. It's the way that it is. They've basically been replaced by all these other positions. Even before, when you used to have the running backs that would catch the football, and it was like, well, they're like a triple threat out there, right? They can run. They know how to block, and they can go out and they can make receptions. Those are probably the least valuable receptions that your offense can produce. Everybody knows that. And it used to probably be the second most valuable receptions when you were running in these dominant systems, or at the very least, it would be the third most valuable reception because you were probably more valuable in a passing game than a tight end at that point in time. And, you certainly than the third wide receivers that were going out there, maybe even more valuable in some cases than a second wide receiver, depending on the offense. So, it just boils down to these running backs. The peak career years for these players really is in the first 2 seasons they're probably in the league. And they're still going to be productive year 3 and probably productive year 4. And then it really starts to go downhill. And the way the system is set up, it's just not something that they can break out of. You have rookie control for 5 seasons if you're a first rounder, 4 seasons if you're not a first rounder. And basically you got 6 years of control for non-first rounders because you go franchise tag if you want to. It's 7 years of control if a player is a first rounder. And because the money is larger at other positions, like this is one of the things that I always say sucks for all these guys that play at these different positions. The money is so big for quarterback, it's rare that you get to the point to where the franchise tag even comes into play for those players. Now, it did with Kirk Cousins in Washington because they didn't want to pay. It did for Dallas and Dak Prescott for God knows what reason. But, it's like the money's so big, Daniel Jones got a deal. And because Daniel Jones gets a deal, it allows them to use the tag on Barkley instead of letting him become a free agent. Now, I don't think he would have gotten a big lucrative deal as a free agent anyway, but would have been interesting at least to see. Wide receivers make so much money that 90% of the time they're not really going to get tagged. They're just going to get extended. Because you don't get those kind of contract holdouts anymore that you used to get where there's real fights on value and payouts and all that. Everyone is pretty much accepting of the markets as they exist. And as long as that contract ends up in there, typically as for many of the positions, the highest paid or maybe somewhere in the top 5, you'll get a deal done. You don't have to use the franchise tag. So that leaves the tag open for all these kind of secondary positions like running back. So you never really shake free. Your career is defined by the franchise tag. And, that same thing holds true really for all positions. And this is, when you're negotiating something and you see what the league has done and you see the power plays that the leagues have pulled to basically keep spending down, I don't understand as a union how you're not going in there and basically fighting to end the rookie contract system as it stands. Like, it just doesn't make sense. The rookie system makes sense when you're in a league where players' careers would last, if they were a decent player, their careers would last 8, 9, 10 years. Okay, because you could deal at that point in time with your rookie contract and 2 franchise tags and still get signed. So you at least had a little bit of leverage to, threaten to play on those franchise tags, regardless of what position you were. Right now, 2 franchise tags, in my opinion, 2 franchise tags would be a killer for a number of positions in the NFL. If you get tagged 2 times, that is probably going to put you into a position where you're getting into your first free agency. If you're a first-round pick, you're probably getting into free agency for your first time at 29, maybe 28, 29. Like, that's not a good age to be going into free agency. At almost any position, that's a terrible age for it. Running back would really be hurt. Wide receivers would be moderately hurt. I think you would have a lot of guys that would tail off. You'd have a couple of guys where it wouldn't impact them because they're just really good. You can find exceptions at wide receiver that you don't find at running back, but it would hurt a couple of players at running back. I think tight end would be okay. Tackle would be fine. Offensive line would all be okay. I think your edge players would get a little bit hurt by that. Cornerbacks definitely would get hurt by that, even though we have seen some players sign deals after being tagged. So that whole system is just a detriment. And the way teams are now, look at how quick they make these decisions on the players. And you can see it in the extensions, right? Most players, if you're going to extend them, are probably extended after 3 years. So if you have enough knowledge to know that you're going to extend a player after 3 years, why is a rookie contract, why does it need to be any more than 3 years in length? Why? There's no reason for it. And realistically, you can go down to 2 years. If you look and you see the functionality of the teams with these players, and you look at the way that they utilize the players, the peak expectation for a lot of these guys is 2-3 years in the league. And they're losing out because as they get a little bit older, teams aren't as interested. But they'd be more interested in the players if they could pick them up as a free agent when they're 24, 25 years old, even if it's on a 3-year deal, 2-year deal, whatever it might be. But this system that exists that gives a team control for 4 or 5 years and basically controls the prime of the career of most of those players. I mean, the players where I would say the prime is clearly beyond a rookie contract would probably be quarterback, probably most of your offensive linemen. But most of the other players, I mean, they're going to peak during their rookie deals and, probably, they might match it for a year or two post that rookie deal, remain in that prime. But it's not like they have the ability to get to a third contract most of the time. Most of the time, a couple years in on those extensions, you start saying, wow, was that really a good deal or not? Tight end is another one where, your prime probably happens after your rookie deal. That's probably another position that would be like that. So most players, I think, would benefit from it. But it's like a subject that's never been approached. Like, I just don't understand. I don't understand how you do a 10-year deal and every player that you have coming into the NFL is going to be impacted by the length of that rookie contract. Why wouldn't you make that a priority? I don't care if the guys who vote right now are quote unquote veterans or are quote unquote stuck on the 4-year deal and they couldn't get out of it. You should be negotiating for the betterment of the players overall. You should have a duty, and the players should, and they all talk about this. You're trying to make things better for the next generation. Well, the way that you make things better for the next generation is to fundamentally change the system. Not just say, it is what it is. The owners got them, and it made some sense, to pull back on those rookie deals that existed in the 2 CBAs ago. Selling point was that money was going to go to the middle class veterans. It didn't, but it did make some sense. Certainly helped teams manage their salary cap a lot better by not locking them into some of those deals. But the running back position, it's just not going to change until you drop the deal length down. If you drop those rookie contract lengths down, the players might be able to make that kind of money. Because what'll happen is, even though the position has been devalued, the production of the running back won't be expected to fall off a cliff after 2 years. So teams can justify at that point saying, okay, the importance of the running back relative to a quarterback is, let's say on a salary scale, let's say the quarterback should be set at a minimum of $45 million if they're a good veteran. Running back is, maybe the quarterback is worth 3 times more than a running back, maybe a little bit more than that, or a little bit less than that. And, you can peg it to that and say, okay, now we're in that ballpark of $16, $17, $18 million. You're not going to be as afraid of doing it because you're still planning on getting 2 productive seasons probably out of that player. Year 3, year 4, and then you keep your fingers crossed into year 5. But with the way the system is now, it just really hurts them. And, you get into this thing where you talk about, well, we got the league to agree to cash minimums. Great, wonderful. No NFL team is even close to those cash minimums. The cash minimums have no bite. They're completely worthless. With the way the system is set up right now, it's a stupid thing to tout that as a victory when it has no bearing on what teams do. Teams set their budget, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Teams set their budget and they work from there. But if you give teams more access to talent and you force them to make decisions earlier in the process, you're probably going to see their budgets go up even further. And they'll make the deals work within the salary cap, and you'll see more guys making money. And nobody's really hurt by it. The only guys that are hurt are those drafted in the first round that completely bust. That's pretty much it. Because if you did 2-year deals, obviously the signing bonus and the guarantees would be way down on those rookie deals. But, sorry, I just got a text here. Okay. So that number would go down. But for everybody else, I mean, it's basically a push. Like if you're a guy struggling to make a football team and you're a 6th round pick, all right, most of your money is really going to be earned by making a football team. It didn't come in the form of that signing bonus. Your benefit is making the team. And, if you are someone who just needs to compete, well, all you were going to make this year, $940,000, I think is a 3rd-year salary right now. You make the team, you'll make $940,000. So if you were no longer on a rookie contract and you were a free agent, you'd still have to make at least $940,000. So you're still fighting for that same amount of money. Like even though you're a guy hanging on, you're still in the same position somewhere. But if you're a guy who's a little bit better, and if you look at the way that we do our OTC valuations, you'll see many of the rookies are worth much more than that if you factor, just how much teams pay on the position. You would look at some of these guys and you would say, oh, okay, if he became a free agent, instead of 940, he'd probably get a 1-year deal for at least 1.5. Maybe a 2-year deal at $2.5 million a year. They make out much better in that scenario, even though the signing bonus has been cut. So really, this is a union problem. That's really what it is. And while, the running backs are the ones that we look at the most, it hits almost everybody in the league. And really, if you shorten the length of the deals, absolutely hits everybody. How much do you think Trevor Lawrence would make right now? If the Jaguars had to put him on a veteran deal. Probably be doing pretty good. So that's the answer for fixing some of the issues. A running back is never going to get paid as if they're a quarterback again. Those numbers that I rattled off earlier, $35 million a year, $30 million a year, that will never, ever, ever happen. They're not going to get up to a running back level. To a wide receiver level. That's just not going to happen. But you shouldn't get into these fights with a team over, just making you feel, I think, at times like you're worthless just because of the position you play. I think that would be gone if those rookie deals were modified. All right. Other thing, I posted this past week. Cash spending in the NFL. So really what brought this on were a number of tweets, mainly regarding DeAndre Hopkins, but a handful that were also mentioning Dalvin Cook, and they're talking about, this team can't do it until they make some more salary cap space. And it's like you have to realize all these teams operate on a budget. No matter what we want to believe about the NFL and the belief that the salary cap prevents teams from spending, the salary cap might prevent a handful of teams from spending in a given season. But for the most part, teams have budgets. Teams have an internal budget. They're running a business. They have a certain amount of money that's going towards football operations. Okay? That money is going to be set. And typically, the way I do this when I do some stuff on the side, typically I peg it to the growth in the salary cap, or the level of the salary cap. It's what is a typical cash outlay in a given season relative to the salary cap. And that's the way the NFL came up with that silly rule that you had to spend like 90% of the cap over a 3-year period. I think that's the number, is 90% right now. And, you start to get a good idea as to what teams are actually willing to spend and what teams maybe are a little bit tighter. And you can look, based on the construction of the current roster, the teams that actually have money to spend. And you can get an idea from that. The teams who are all in this season are probably going to cut back next year, or, maybe might look to release a couple of players. So, for example, the Chiefs, they're a team that's been linked to Hopkins a lot, and everyone just puts on it like, their salary cap is a problem. Their salary cap is a problem. Their salary cap is a problem. Yeah, the Chiefs have no cap room. They have like $200,000 in cap space right now, or something ridiculous like that, $500,000. But the Chiefs, over the last 5 years, are the lowest spending team in the NFL. They're one of only three teams. Let me see. Why didn't I make this table sortable? 3 teams I think one of 3 teams that has not spent over a 5-year period an average equal to at least the cap. The Bears are exactly equal to the cap at 100. That the Chiefs spend 98.9% of the cap. So for the Chiefs, if they were to hold true on that, your estimated budget for this year would be about $222 million. Well, they're already $217 committed, for 60 players. Now, some of those players might not make it. 60 players, I'm kind of taking into account, well, you're going to have guys on IR, so you have a lot of up and down. And obviously you have, your practice squads and stuff like that come into play too. So I just figured I would take 60 players and do that. But, for the Chiefs, that leaves them $5 million to spend. And, you got Chris Jones probably looking for a contract, and he might be very, very, very expensive. So they're not really in a position unless they really blow away their norms. And teams do that all the time. A lot of times, you see a range. There will be certain teams where there's very little variance in the way they spend. Then there'll be other teams where you see a lot of variance in the way they spend. And those are the teams typically that you'll see a year where they spend a lot, then you'll see a year where they're kind of cold, simply because it's almost like you're borrowing from next year. You're going to go to your owner and say, hey, I really want to sign this guy for 15 this year. Can you approve that? And typically it's going to get approved, but probably come with a little asterisk like, okay, but next year you're going to have 15 less than, to spend on the projected budget, just so it just kind of balances out. So you start to look at that and you start to realize, well, this is a big reason why in the summer you don't see teams really spending any money. So right now, the teams that are over their norms are the Ravens at about 47 million over. A lot of that's attributed to the quarterback, obviously. The Bills at 31 over, Texans 26, Falcons 25. Now, the Falcons number is misleading. The Falcons are an example of a team that does spend a lot. They're usually one of the higher spenders in the league. They've been wiped out by the salary cap for a couple of seasons now. So I would actually say that they have more of a budget than this, but they're one of those rare teams where the salary cap just throttled them for too many years. Most teams, the cap is a deterrent for 1, maybe 2 years at the most. I'd say with Atlanta, it's been a deterrent for like 4. So theirs is a little bit different, but the Giants are 20 over. Dolphins, I had a typo on this. I had the Dolphins at 20 over. The Dolphins are more like 12 over. Browns about 19 over. Broncos 14 over. Eagles 14 over. Seahawks 12 over. Then you got teams that are right at their budget. The Chargers have about 3 million more. Colts 4. Chiefs 5. Jaguars 8. Panthers 9. Steelers 9. Saints 11, Jets 12, but the Jets have the Quinnen Williams thing. Now, obviously, that deal is done. I don't have any particulars of it, so no real need to talk about it this week. Unless I have a question that came in about it, say whatever if that's the case. But they have that, and right now they have Aaron Rodgers at a $1 million salary. Obviously, he's going to make more money than $1 million. So the Jets very quickly are going to be on the like the Bills, 30 over their typical budget. The Bengals are 12 under with a bunch of guys, you Burrow extension looming. Raiders at 15, Commanders have 19 to spend. Arizona, now Arizona's a team that's just cutting back, so they have money to spend, but this is probably a choice for them not to utilize it. They're trying to gain cap room, and you're saving money this year over your normal spending patterns. And hopefully that means that you're in a position where your owner is going to say, hey, you got more money to spend next year. Let's make this work. Lions, they have some money to spend. Dallas, but Dallas doesn't spend much. Typically, they'd rather, I think, carry over. 49ers have some money, but they have cap issues. The Bears, they have money and, whatever. Patriots have money they can spend. Titans are a team that is probably a little bit salary cap crunched, but they're willing to spend. So, I mean, I guess that's one of the reasons why they've been tied into Hopkins a lot. Vikings, way under their norms with spending, but that's a salary cap issue right now. Buccaneers, 54 million under, 55 million under their norms. But again, that's a salary cap issue. They have nothing they can spend on. They have no room. Packers, same thing, 66 under. And then the Rams, same issue, 72 million under their norms. You've got to know these numbers when you start getting into these free agents and you start saying like, well, you've got Ngakoue and you've got this guy and you've got Cook and you got Hopkins and you've got all these players. Are some of them going to sign? Yeah. Well, one or two of them maybe even sign a surprising deal that's like 10 million a season. Maybe Hopkins, something like that. Cook, probably not. Ngakoue, probably not. But they might get a little something, 5 million, 6 million. Those kind of deals might exist out there. But, you run into these things, and I think sometimes as fans, we just don't pay attention to this at all. Media, I think, doesn't pay attention to this at all, or maybe they don't want to pay attention to it. So it ends up not really being talked about, or it's just put forward that, the owners have unlimited cash to spend, which they don't, or at least they're not willing to do that. Maybe you can create scenarios to make them willing to do it, but not in the current system as it exists. So when we start looking at all these players, and this is where players probably get a disservice by their agents at times too. Yeah, is a certain player, I'll use Hopkins as an example. Is Hopkins still worth, 15, 16, 18 million dollars a year? Possibly. I think you could make an argument that, okay, maybe, maybe he's still worth something like that. But you have to adjust what you are willing to play for when you get to this point and you're still a free agent. If a player like Ngakoue is still worth, at least $6-7 million, I can buy that. You have to make an adjustment when you get to this point and you go, I am not going to play for less than $7 or $8 million this year. Like that, that's my absolute least I'll play for. And, you've just eliminated by saying that at least half of the NFL. About 16 teams. And then you have a couple others where it's like, is that the only thing that you want to spend your money on? Do you have, some pressing needs? So just using that $8 million number, that basically eliminates 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so at $8 million, we eliminate 15 teams. 15 teams. I think we can throw the Jets and the Bengals out because of stuff they have coming up. So that's 17 teams that you can eliminate. Steelers probably wouldn't be considering anything like that, but let's just keep them in there. You would look at the Cardinals as rebuilding, so that'd be 18. You would look at I wouldn't look at the Bears that way. I think you'd look at the Vikings as potentially kind of retooling. So that's 18. The Buccaneers, no cap room, that's 19. Packers, nothing, that's 20. Right? Rams, 21. So basically we're taking 21 teams out of the mix, maybe a couple more. So your team pool is very small. And that's not even getting into the fact of, do they need that position? Like Dallas. Does Dallas need another pass rusher? Probably not. So you have that aspect of it too. Now, you might be able to convince one of these teams that's already over to go even more over. It's like, well, you're already all in. But for the most part, you're just holding out hope that an injury happens. And when that injury occurs, that you're able to strike a deal for more money. But this is why so many guys in the NFL end up being forced into retirement, because the thing with the NFL is an out of sight, out of mind league. When you're out of the league, you're out of the league. It's very hard to get back in. Like, it's amazing Beckham got back in. But for the most part, when you're out of the league, you're out of the league. So, I mean, you look at these players, who are available right now, that used to be on big money deals. So let me just pull up the free agents. So, I'll throw out Carson Wentz and Matt Ryan. So I mentioned DeAndre Hopkins, whatever's there. Kenny Golladay is probably shot. Byron Jones is hurt. Taylor Lewan, he might have retired officially. I'm not even sure on that. You got Ezekiel Elliott, Deion Jones, Robert Quinn, Marcus Peters, William Jackson, Yannick Ngakoue, Dalvin Cook, John Johnson, Zach Cunningham. He retired. Ronald Darby, Jadeveon Clowney, George Fant, Shelby Harris, Michael Brockers. You run these names off. These guys can still play football at some level. Some of them last year played a lot. And people would talk about them still being wonderful players. Miles Jack. Let me sort these by snap counts even. Sean Evans, Roger Saffold, Deron Harmon, Eli Apple, Marcus Joyner. Now Joyner, I don't think played for a lot of money last year, right? With the Jets. Yeah, he was pretty cheap, 2-1, 2-6. Miles Jack, Troy Hill, Trey Turner, Gabe Jackson, Fournette, whatever. But anyway, the point is, you run through these names, and you've got a lot of names of players who used to be great, but are on the decline, but they can probably still play football. But, and you've got players who were productive enough to see the field a lot last year. But, you see the field a lot, like maybe like a George Fant, and you set your expectations very high. When that market doesn't develop, you got to pivot. You got to decide what you want to do. And you can't just say, that money isn't going to be there. Now, unless you're more than happy to retire. If you're happy to retire, that's different. But you have to realize that when you're at this point in the game, when you're at this point in the off season, and you look at this, you have to know there's not a lot of money left to go around in the league. And so your choice is basically go and play for cheap this year, hope you do well, and then you can get back to your $8 million number, $10 million number next year. Or that's probably it. And if you don't sign now for, I'm just throwing a number out there, instead of 8, if you don't sign now for 4, if you wait and wait and wait, the next thing that pops up, barring some crazy injury, is an offer for the veterans minimum or to be a veteran on the practice squad. Like, okay, maybe that'll help you stay in the league, but, wouldn't your better option have been to stay in the league and make your $4 million? And actually have a fighting chance at, getting that deal the next year. I always think that that's something, one of the things that, one of the old corners on the Jets, Antonio Cromartie, really good player, freakish athlete. He did that. He had to go and, he had to take a deal, and he did. Basically for the minimum out in Arizona, played great, and ended up making, decent money again. Let me see what Cromartie was at. He was a byproduct of just being in a bad situation on the Jets, and his tail end of that, and he got cut, and that hurt him. So he went from making $8 million a year to 3.5. So it's like he was worth more than 3.5, but was willing to play for 3.5. Went back to the Jets then. After, I think it was one season away. He was away in 2014. He went to Arizona 3-5, went back to the Jets, and he earned $7 million that year. Now he got cut the year after that, and he signed for 2, and then that was it for him. But it's like he played that situation properly. He took what the market was willing to give him to make sure he stayed in the league, and it got him one more payday, maybe even 2. If you want to look at that last season with the Colts where he made a little bit of money, because otherwise he was probably done. If he doesn't take that deal, he's probably finished. So you have to be willing to do that. And, it's one of those things where when we start looking at these free agents available and you just start to wonder, oh, how did this guy not get signed? How did this guy not get signed? And then even as a fan or a reporter on the league, by next year, you forget that guy's even around. You just completely forget because he hasn't been, front and center in the NFL. He'd been out of the league. The one thing with Beckham that helped him out was he does a really good job with publicity. And he did a great job with it last year, trying to make it sound like there was this Odell Beckham sweepstakes going on. How he was choosing this team and, he would really want to go to a playoff contender. And then it's like the offers came in. It was like, what? I'm not playing for that. But at least he stayed, I guess, in the public eye because of that. And that helped him out this year, getting an outlandish contract from Baltimore. Just one of the worst contracts that I can picture a team signing in quite some time. Now, maybe Beckham will play great, and that'll justify the investment there, but that's just a horrific contract if you're a team. Like the precedent they set with that was just awful. But you got to be aware of those budgets for these teams. You got to be aware of what the teams spend. You got to be aware of where they are with spending. And this starts in free agency. And it becomes easier and easier to see as you get, more through things. But, you can use the projections we have for the draft picks, which are always very good. So, you can go into the league going into free agency and say, okay, this is where they're at right now. This is where they'll be after the draft. If we throw the signing bonus money in there, plus a couple rookie salaries. Let's bring the roster up to 45 players. 44 players, just by throwing a couple minimum numbers in there. We'll pretend they're undrafteds. And now we've got, whatever other players they can sign to get up to 53 players, or however many players you want to use. If you want to use 60, bring it up to 50. Just say, okay, we factor in where they're at with the draft right now before making any trades or anything like that. Here's where their cash budget is. Here's where it is with rookies. Here's where it is if we bring the roster up to X amount of players. Here's what's left over for 7 free agents, 10 free agents. And you can very, very quickly get an idea of which teams are going to have those budgets outside of the cap room to spend. And what teams you're really going to have to do a great job convincing that they really need a player, if you want to get that player to sign. And if you don't get signed in the first week of free agency, once again, you got to start changing. You got to start changing your expectations up. If you want to stay in the league. All right, let's take a look at questions for the week. I don't think there's too many. You know what? Let me start with Threads. Let's see if anybody replied on Threads. Let's see. All right, I got the phone out. Let's see if I can actually do this. I got to try to read. Oh, I did get one question from Threads. Here we go. This is from Mendy. What are some mini projects and research projects you'd recommend someone do if they're pursuing a career in football administration? Good question. So I think one of the biggest things that you can do, and I say this all the time, and I know it's hard. I know it's very hard, but it is become kind of part of that analytics community, I guess if you want to call it that, on Twitter. Just interact with people that do analytics, and you focus on the contract part of it. Whatever stuff you want to look at with contracts, you focus on that, and you try to create a presence somewhere online and share your work. And one of the reasons that sharing work is good is because when you share work, you get feedback. Whether it's positive or negative, all feedback is good. Unless the feedback is just jerky, all feedback is good. It gives you ideas as to, okay, this is where I made a mistake, or, this is something that I did wrong, or this is something that I kind of screwed up. I think that's something. I think if you get into contracts themselves, one of the things that a lot of people do is you start looking at stuff with like rookies, like how much was paid out for undrafted players and stuff like that. That's pretty boring. Everybody does it. So I would say don't do that. You want to have a fundamental understanding, I think, of certain things that teams do. You want to have fundamental understanding, of course, of the salary cap. I think if you really wanted to do some interesting projects, because it all ties in with it, and these are some things that we do for people, and sometimes we'll put them in a premium section too. I think you want to look at players, maybe from a historical standpoint, not so far in the past that it really doesn't make sense. But from recent history, you can start looking at things where you start focusing on players and positions, and you start looking at, let's just use a arbitrary cutoff, top 15 paid wide receivers, top 15 paid edge rushers in a given season. Track how they did after they signed their deals. How did those deals work out? How much dead money was left over? How much was paid out? That kind of stuff. What was the performance levels like? So just take a look at, what kind of pressures were recorded by maybe PFF, before and after. That's the kind of stuff that I'd personally be interested in. But it's also, you need to have a fundamental understanding of the way that the contracts themselves work. Contract projections are always a good way to, get a handle on stuff. Because if you did work in football admin, one of the things that you're doing, right, is you're researching what the market is for a player. We talk about that with Barkley. The Giants know, they have a pretty good idea probably what the market would be for a player like that. So you're trying to craft an offer that prevents that player from considering going to market. Now that case is a little bit unique, but and if you were negotiating with a free agent, you're trying to come up with a deal that makes sense within a market. So do some player profiles, do some profiles on individuals where you kind of try to first just come up with a overarching value for a player, argument as to why, what are comparables that you see for that player. Why do you put him in this bucket of players? Like sometimes I've dealt with people that will, put someone in an outlandish range. It's like, what? Like, where are you seeing that? For the player. And then there's other times where you see someone get sold short. Like, he should be, you're looking at this. Like, don't look at that. Look at these, look at these players. I think those are things that you can do to just try to, get a better understanding. But, the stuff that's online, where you can interact with people via Twitter or Threads, or whatever it might be, just to share your work, try to get feedback on it. I think that's just always, very good. There's a group of us cap junkies online. I don't think any of us have met in person. It's possible maybe we did somewhere and I'm just not thinking of it. But, a lot of us haven't met in person. Yeah, I'm not including Brad in that group. I know Brad from other stuff and, different kind of thing. But, of the people that were like the older generation of capologist people like myself, I don't think any of us have met, but we've probably been talking online for 15 years. Just to give you an example of, how that stuff kind of works out. Um, Bryce was probably in that group at one point in time. So, yeah, obviously I met Bryce. Um, but yeah, it's like the social media stuff, it's a great format for being able to share your work, share ideas, get feedback, and interact with people and do stuff. Now, the other thing is, if you are, and you're saying football admin, so I'm not going to say big data bowl. That's probably not going to work for you. I wish that they actually did a contest that would be similar like that with contracts. I think that'd be pretty cool. We did some work, not really work. We just shared some data. This is many years ago for a competition, working with contracts that was, sort of like that. It was more like data analysis of contract stuff. And I don't really even know how far that got, but I thought that was a really interesting thing to do. And I think that would really be an interesting thing to tackle, to see, whatever you wanted to look at with this group of players, um, you know, contract structures or whatever, try to come up with an optimum way to structure contracts for a given position, um, you know, based on age and performance of player. Something like that. I think that'd be really cool if they ever did, competitions that way. I think that'd be really neat, because my own opinion is that's an area that's kind of untapped. It still kind of lends itself more towards, okay, we've got a market. How do we make a contract work within a market? Whereas the way that I look at it is the contract work itself should really go hand in hand with analytics. With people who are going to do a better job than I probably would at legitimate performance projections. And, I might have some opinions as to, maybe why I might, lean away from something that someone was saying there. But, when they're coming up with numbers on stuff, it's like, okay, if this is how you're telling me he's going to play, this is probably what it's worth. But this is what the market is. Is that worth doing? I think there's a whole lot of unexplored potential in doing stuff like that, versus right now, which is more getting into the player data, player tracking, and stuff like that. But I think that there's more value right now in terms of constructing a team in really doing player projections and how those projections match with market projections to see who's a fit, or if you're talking like a Moneyball thing, who would probably outperform, based on, what you're seeing with, how this player might fit in your system, how he might fit, how his performance level maybe would be raised based on the correlation with some of the talented players that you already have in place. And what you're saying, his value probably is market wise, to where you say, okay, we're probably getting a $5 million value on this on a free agent. And I think that's a whole avenue, really, that can get explored. I think it'd be neat if they did a little competition like that. But any kind of projects you can do where I think you're looking at effective ways to spend your money, utilize money, structure it, whatever it might be. I think that would be a interesting thing to do. Oh, one other thing, you can look at current contract trends. That's one of those things I keep saying I'm going to make a video for and never do. Where you study certain things that teams are doing, with the salary cap and contract structures. All right, that does it for my questions from Threads. All right, let's see if I got any questions on Twitter. Doesn't look like too many this week. We're in the summer, so not a big deal. All right, let's take a look here. Let's see what we got. Joe Mixon. Here we go. Couple questions. Brian, why do teams sometimes aim to delay signing bonus payments? There's no cap allowance in delaying the payment of dead money. Is it tax related? No, I think it's just if you have money and it's sitting in an account somewhere, you can make money off that money. Your money is always working for you, right? It's just like anything. Imagine you work at a company, right? And you sell something, and typically your bill on that is going to be something like net 30, like the payments due in 30 days. This is business kind of transactions. And sometimes what you'll see in that is you'll give a discount if they are willing to pay it within 10 days or 7 days or 5 days, because there's value in having the cash on hand for both parties. So it's the same kind of concept. Why would I want to give you $10 million today if I can hold that $10 million for 45 days and I can let that money work for me in some way, shape, or form, make a little bit more on it, so my net payment to you is not really, whatever number I just said there. I say 45 million. Or did I say? I know I said 45 days. Let's say 10 million. The net impact is a little bit less because you let that money work for you for a little bit of time. So that's really the reason for it. And that's really a big reason for why you're deferring those payments. Gavin, with a starting quarterback on a rookie deal, does it make more sense to use the all cash structure when adding talent and free agency? No, I think it actually makes more sense to go for it and figure out whatever the ways are that you can add the most talent possible, because this is the time where you can deal with the salary cap fallout the best. So in my opinion, if I'm in a position where I'm going to draft a quarterback, I think the way that I really would want to approach this is when he's a rookie, I want to go out there and I want to spend a lot. And I want to make stuff happen as best I can to maximize my roster with talent. If that means void years, I'll use those void years. I'll get creative as I can. And the reason that I'm saying that is because the window that you have with that rookie is pretty small. And too often, teams take this approach that's like, well, he's going to be a rookie. Let's wait until the second year. Or we don't know if he's going to be any good. Let's wait until we know that he's good. Or let's wait until we know that he's kind of bad and everyone's saying that we need to get help for him, and then we'll go and spend. It's like, you're just, in all of those scenarios, you're kind of wasting your shot at it. Given that most contracts, no matter what you do, you can get out of them after 2 years, as long as you don't do something incredibly stupid, what I'm willing to do is I'm willing to put my best possible team on the field in terms of resource usage in my player's rookie year. And I'll have those same players there in his second year, where I'm probably not going to be able to add much because I just went all out spending. But I'm going to get 2 years if that works, and I'm going to let the team build whatever kind of chemistry. After those 2 years, the guys that aren't working, I'm going to move them out. And odds are I'm going to have salary cap space again in year 3 to where I can go and I can do it again. So I'm going to be able to put the best possible roster around him year 1, year 2. Then I'm going to be able to put the best possible roster around him year 3, year 4. And, then you deal with the fallout as he moves on, and his cap charges start to increase, and, the way that you can deal with the stuff, you'll still have an ability in year 5 to add some players to the team. It just might be you're going to have to be more cautious with it because of the way that you're going to be spending everywhere else. And the way that you maximize the amount of total talent that you can add in there is really by the prorating out some of that money. Now, I'm not saying go crazy. I'm not saying everybody needs to be a minimum salary and you get the most possible out of it. But I want to be able to add the most players that I can. And remember, dead money tomorrow is going to be less as a percentage basis on the cap than having it buried in your salaries this year when the salary cap number is going to be lower for your team. So that's the way that I would do it. People might have a different opinion, but that's the way that I would approach it. And, I just want to maximize my window. I think the Jaguars have done a good job with that. With the way that they tried to kind of build a roster out. Now they actually probably went a little too overboard with some of the spending, but I think they did a decent job with it. Oh, let's see, I got a problem here. Let me see if I can fix this. All right, I think I fixed that. Apparently I had an outlet go bad, which I did not realize until just now. I will have to fix that. All right, so that's fixed. At least for now. I have my laptop plugged back in again so I can record on this. I got worried that it was going to shut off. Okay, Davey, can I have some money? Sure, you can have some, just not from me. Alex, how can someone be a post-June 1 cut but get signed anywhere else? This is someone who was cut before June 1st but designated. Does it save money or push some back? So the post-June 1 designation is just simply an accounting designation. From a real procedural standpoint, the player is actually terminated. The contract is terminated. It's just from an accounting standpoint, the NFL puts it on hold as if the player wasn't released. So that's why they're allowed to sign anywhere. For the team that has the dead money involved, yeah, it pushes it back. So you end up only keeping on the books the prorated money from this year in 2023, and you defer all the acceleration to 2024 versus having to take it all in 2023. Beantown USA, moves the Patriots should make apart from DeAndre Hopkins. I would think at this point, what else are you really going to do? This is the time of year where, it's kind of like, whatever. If I'm New England, I think I just carry over as much as I can the next year. You're going to have the most cap room in the NFL. So you'll know at that point if Mac Jones is good or is terrible. My guess is he's better than he was last year. But probably a very low ceiling kind of player. But you can probably build something around a player like that. And you're gonna make better use of your money by, if you've got 17 million in cap room right now, and obviously that cuts down as you get closer to the regular season, you're better off keeping your 12 million, carrying it over, and just being in a position where you can go crazy next year if you need to. Hopefully you do a better job than, on day one getting talked into the Jonnu Smith type contracts. But, you can go out there and you can target free agents. You can have money lined up for your own extensions that you want to do. If Jones plays well, that's a guy that you can extend. You have the money if you need to next year to make some trades. So if I'm New England, all my eyes are on 2024. I'm just going to take 2023 as a season that is what it is. You look at Buffalo is loaded up for this year. Miami is loaded up for this year. Jets are loaded up for this year. And, obviously Jets are going to be 20-0. But, those three teams are loaded up, and they're all in a position to where next year there could be a major fall for all three of them. You look at cap considerations. Let me just pull those numbers up. For next year, it's like the Patriots are top in the league. Right now, the Jets are fourth worst position in the league. Dolphins, fifth worst. Bills, sixth worst. And, Miami has a quarterback that's probably going to look for an extension. The Jets, who knows what it'll be. They might be back to Zach Wilson as their quarterback if Aaron Rodgers calls it quits. if things don't go well, they'll have a whole new coaching staff and everything else. Even if things go great, as I hope they do, you're still talking about a 40-something-year-old quarterback at that point in time. So if I'm New England, I'm looking at this as whatever happens this year happens. My fate is probably locked in one way or the other. But, I'm putting myself in a big advantageous position relative to the other teams in the AFC East next year by holding on to what I can and just really being in a position to blow things out next year. All right, let's see. Next question. Derek, thoughts on David Tepper as an owner? He's a 5-year stretch of mediocre teams, hired a college coach with limited NFL experience based on vibes. Also failed construction project for a new team practice facility that rarely gets talked about. Right now, I don't think you would look at him and, be too excited. Now, one of the things, first of all, one of the first things that you look at, does he get in the way? I don't think so. So, I mean, once you have that, I mean, that's always a help, that you don't have what seems to be a active, owner. Active's not the right word. Meddlesome owner. I don't think you have that. The Panthers have, basically been, around average in terms of spending. So, I mean, there's been, doesn't seem that there's been a issue with that. He's got some good people in his front office, I think. I think the issue that's there right now, and this is probably one of those things where, you're getting used to how you run a football organization, right? It's no different than, now it's a very public forum, where we look at Elon Musk and you say, well, how in the world does this guy run Twitter? And obviously most people have been pretty negative on it, but it's a line of work that's not his wheelhouse. Right? He's innovative. He's got these companies that make cool things, and, Tesla and SpaceX. Twitter is not, it's social media. That's not his domain. Being a football owner, maybe it takes some time, to, learn exactly how to do that and what's a winning strategy. Other people go in a different direction. Like they go and they hire the Sean Paytons of the world, and you go, okay, do it. Doesn't mean that's going to be successful either. I think the thing that would worry a little bit about it is, and this really isn't a worry, but it's just that I remember when he came in and it was all that talk about, I'm a big analytics guy, investor. It's like this is everything data. And everything they did was completely opposite of that, with the hiring, with the decision-making within the organization. So, I mean, if you're worried a little bit about that, you could be, but, I wouldn't be that worried about it. Like I said, I think they actually have built a pretty decent front office there. And it's just has to figure out, what direction they kind of want to go in, with a lot of the stuff that's there. So, but I wouldn't be worried about it at the moment. I wouldn't be like, oh, he's the greatest owner in the world, but he did allow them to purge the team of a lot of what are probably mistake contracts that cost him, cost the team a lot of money, with no productivity coming back, but they didn't chase the sunk costs on that. I mean, that's kind of a positive. So, I think it's just, you just say, it's okay right now. Sean, contract prediction for Higgins. Do you think they might let him walk? So, yeah, I do think there's a chance that they may let him walk. My opinion is, if I had to choose between Higgins and Chase, I think I would choose Higgins. And I know that's going to sound crazy. I think Higgins will be more affordable. And I think you could trade Chase and get like a big premium back. That's just my opinion on it. I think Higgins is going to look for. I mean, Mike Williams got 20, so I mean Higgins is going to look for, at least that. Let's see. You got A.J. Brown, Debo, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore. All these guys. Now, you see, all these guys are considered like a number. That's the one thing that works against him is, people are not going to look at him as the number one, because of Chase. I'm just looking at the players. Right now here, I'm just McLaurin, he can compare to that. It's just again, McLaurin. If you give it benefit of the doubt, it's that McLaurin doesn't have anybody there playing with him. Was DJ Moore at? He had the 1 year probably. He had multiple years in that. So my assumption, is Higgins is gonna look in that 23 range. I think that's what it certainly over 20, probably 23. I think that tracks with McLaurin, that tracks with Debo, and I know there's some differences there, but I kind of think like that's the range that he's going to look for. I don't think the Bengals can do these deals to where you're paying him 23, Chase 25, and $50 million to the quarterback all at the same time. I don't think that's going to work. I could be wrong, but if it was me, I'd keep Higgins. I'd trade Chase, knowing I'm going to get a big premium. I think for him, where I don't think you would get that for Higgins, and with Higgins, you'd end up having to do tag and trade scenario, right? Because he's a free agent. Is he a free agent this upcoming year? I think he is. He's a second rounder, right? Yeah, he'll be a free agent after this year. So yeah, I think that's what it'd be. But yeah, I think the numbers he would be looking for are around 23 a year. What a fun guy. Could you foresee a time when the running back position is handled differently than other positions with the rookie contracts? For example, first round rookie running back eligible for free agency after 3. All the rookies eligible after 2. No, that you can't. I don't think you can craft a whole set of rules that's all exclusions for that one position. And even if you did, I don't know if it would really help them. It would give you less incentive to draft a player that's a running back if you did that, right? Because you'd be going from 5 years of cost control for every other first round player to 3. So, I don't think that would really help them either. But no, I don't see any way that they would do that. Ricker, anything with Burrow and Herbert extensions? Are they waiting on each other to go first? You see a scenario where neither gets a deal before the season starts. So yeah, I could definitely see scenarios where neither of them get a contract. It all depends on what you're asking for. There's no real rush on the team's part, right? They're both under contract 2 more years, right? Let me just make sure I have this correct. Yeah, so there's no real rush on their part. I would imagine each one is waiting for the other. I think that's probably accurate. But, this is also that dead zone of the year. So outside of the franchise players, usually the talks don't heat up until... And I know we got the Quinnen deal done, but the Jets do go to camp a little bit earlier than other teams, and they have the whole Hard Knocks thing. I think a lot of times those deals really don't get done until right at the start of training camp or, a couple days into training camp, that kind of stuff. So I'm not surprised by it just because this time of year is usually pretty dead with everything. So not too surprising. All right, let's see. A couple more here, and then that's it. Let's see what we got here. John, what do you think Rodgers' cap number is going to look like for 23 and 24? I think it'll probably look pretty similar to what it would have been when the Jets originally traded for him. Something like 15, 16, 17 million this year, somewhere between 35 and 40 next year, and then a bunch of money deferred to 2025 is dead money. Joey, how much money does Dalvin get, and when does he sign? I guess he'll sign right before training camp and a couple $1 million. I can't imagine more than 6. I could easily see a scenario where it's as low as 2 or 3. And I wouldn't be, $2 million is what he's owed by Minnesota. So it would have to be more than 2. It would either be less than 2 or have to be more than 2. So it couldn't be 2. It'd either be for the minimum or, a little bit more than 2 million, because all that salary is going to be offset. So probably 3 to 4 million base value is probably where he would be at. Everyone is saying, Dalvin Cook is mulling over multiple offers. If he has multiple offers on the table and he hasn't taken them yet, it probably means they're crappy offers, which means they're probably pretty low. And, I just think that's what the market is. I don't believe, where some of these other players you might see an injury and that increases their value. I think even if someone gets hurt, it's not like you're going to go and say, okay, well, now we got to get Dalvin for 10. I don't see that at all. So if I had to guess, somewhere 3 to 5 million tops, and a couple days before training camp, I guess, starts. Maybe right at the start of camp, bring him in for the physical right then. Andy, is it possible to protect traded picks in the NFL like they do in the NBA? Like, could the Texans have said 24 first, top 5? So that's a great question. And I've had this discussion before with someone. I don't believe there's any rule that prevents you from doing it. The NFL's just never done it. But I don't think there's a rule from, protecting your picks. I think it'd be an interesting wrinkle. If you had that happen. But I don't believe there's a I don't believe that there's a rule that would prevent you from doing that. All right, so that does it for me. I'll probably try to do a podcast next week because I'm assuming the Williams numbers will come in. So that deal's probably not official yet. They released the terms of the deal, but it's probably not official. I'm assuming Pro Football Talk will be the first to get their hands on the numbers once it gets sent to the league. So I would guess it gets sent to the league Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at the latest. So I'm assuming we'll get those numbers by then. So I'll probably do a podcast where we can talk a little bit about that. See how much of that moved the market. My assumption is it's probably a slight move of the market, and this is probably your cap on the market now. And then you got the interesting Chris Jones stuff, and that's something we can talk about after we see the Williams numbers, come in completely. Then we can go more in depth on that. So I think we'll definitely get a podcast in hopefully next week, unless I have something going on that I'm unaware of. So I think that does it for me otherwise. So hopefully everybody will have a great week, and I will talk to you all again soon.